Okay, let's dive in. We've got this really interesting set of documents here detailing some recent executive actions.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to focus on two key things today: shifts in education policy and some pretty big moves on trade, especially tariffs.
Right. Consider this the quick guide to what's actually changing and, why it matters to you.
Exactly. So, education first, the administration seems to be reshaping school discipline.
Yeah, and also limiting DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion that's in schools and universities. We're seeing orders from, what, January to April 2025?
That's right. And then on trade, new tariffs are rolling out.
And you mentioned a particular interest in electronics like televisions. That's part of the picture, too, mainly from April 25 actions.
Yep. So our goal here is just to pull out the key bits from these sources, connect the dots, and give you a clear sense of these major policy shifts.
Okay, let's start with education then. Several EOs came out in 2025.
Right? Hitting on DEI, discipline, even COVID mandates, and the Department of Education itself. Let's zoom in, though, on that April 23rd order: common sense school discipline policies.
Okay, what's the core idea there?
Well, it basically rejects looking at racial disparities when it comes to discipline.
So it's pushing back against that idea.
Exactly. It criticizes a 2014 guidance letter, claiming it kind of pressured schools to make discipline outcomes equal by race, maybe ignoring the actual behavior.
And they're citing, what, a 2018 report supporting that view?
Yeah, and arguing the Biden administration's 2023 guidance basically did the same thing.
So the new order wants new guidance pretty quickly.
Within 30 days.
Yeah.
And it stresses objective behavior over equity metrics.
Yeah.
It talks about enforcement against racially preferential practices, coordinating with states, revising the code for military schools.
And report, too, looking into past investigations.
Yeah, within 120 days. Analyzing past probes and the role of nonprofits in promoting what the EO calls discriminatory equity ideology. It even links back to definitions from that January ending radical indoctrination EO.
Discriminatory equity ideology. That framing is key. It ties into the broader push against DEI, defining certain concepts like those associated with critical race theory as divisive.
Right, arguing DEI itself violates civil rights laws. That January EO you mentioned, it aimed for patriotic admiration in K-12, brought back the 1776 Commission.
And restricted funds for certain things, like prohibited concepts and social transition of a minor student. But the definitions weren't very precise, were they?
No, definitely some vagueness there, which has caused concern. And it's hitting higher ed, too.
How so?
Affirmative action revoked via EO 11146. Federal agencies told to cut DEI programs. Guidance on the big SFFA Supreme Court ruling, suggesting a really broad ban on race-conscious factors.
And accreditation reform. That's a big lever.
Yeah, targeting DEI requirements there, linking accreditation to student outcomes, but without race or sex data and intellectual diversity.
Wow. So the reactions. Predictably strong, I imagine.
Very. Civil rights groups, NAACP, ACLU, they're calling these attacks on civil rights, saying they'll harm vulnerable students most.
And universities.
Higher ed associations worried about autonomy, academic freedom. Lawsuits are already happening.
Okay, that sets the scene for education. What about trade? Switching gears now.
Right, trade. It's a pretty complex tariff strategy. A big piece is this reciprocal tariff regime kicked off in April 2025.
Reciprocal, so like tit for tat.
Sort of. A 10% baseline tariff, but higher rates on countries that run trade surpluses with the U.S.
But didn't they pause most of those increases?
They did for 90 days. The big exception, China. Their rate jumped almost immediately up to 125%.
Oof. And some goods were excluded initially.
Yeah, things already under Section 232 tariffs, for example.
Speaking of Section 232, the national security tariffs, they're using that a lot more now, aren't they?
Definitely. Since February 25, new investigations started into copper, lumber, semiconductors, and related electronics pharma, critical minerals, even heavy-duty trucks.
So expanding the scope of national security in trade terms.
Seems like it. And remember the Section 301 tariffs on China, the earlier ones?
Yes, they're still around.
Mostly still in place, and even increasing on some strategic goods. And crucially, these are usually on top of the new reciprocal tariffs.
So layering tariffs on Chinese goods, that's a heavy impact.
Huge. Now, here's the bit specific to your interest in electronics, like TVs. Initially, April 11th, they were excluded from those reciprocal tariffs.
Okay, so TV's got to pass.
For about 2 days. Then the president indicated, nope, not permanent, said they were moving to a different tariff bucket.
The different bucket, what does that mean? Uncertainty, basically.
Exactly. And right around then, they launched that Section 232 investigation into semiconductors and their derivative
A
products.
derivative product, that sounds broad.
It explicitly included the whole electronic supply chain. Plus, there's a separate Section 232 probe into critical minerals, also used in electronics.
Ah, so even if TVs aren't hit by the reciprocal tariffs right now.
They could still get hit with tariffs later under the Section 232 national security banner. Unless maybe they're USMCA origin, they might still face the baseline 10%.
Interesting. So the door isn't closed on tariffs for electronics. It's just maybe the different door.
That seems to be the signal. And retailers, industry groups like NRF, CTA, they're really worried.
About costs, I assume.
Yeah, predicting higher prices for consumers on everything from TVs to clothes, saying it hurts business, hurts the economy. You know, the classic tariffs or taxes on Americans argument.
And what do economic analyses generally say? Do they back that up?
Mostly, yeah. They tend to suggest tariffs drag down economic welfare, lead to higher prices. They point to past tariffs as evidence. Some projections show pretty significant costs per household.
Which kind of clashes with the administration's stated goals,
Yeah.
like fair trade and reshoring manufacturing.
Right, there's that pension. So, wrapping up, what's the big picture here?
Well, you've got a pretty clear snapshot now. Education policy is shifting focus strongly towards individual behavior, away from systemic equity concerns, really curtailing DEI.
And in trade, it's this complex web of tariffs, existing ones, new ones, reciprocal ones, potential national security ones.
With electronics like TVs potentially caught up in that national security angle down the line.
It shows a very clear direction from the administration, doesn't it? And equally clear, strong reactions from those affected.
Definitely. It really tees up a key question for you, listening in. How might these shifts, in schools and with the potential cost for electronics actually impact your own world, your decisions?
Yeah, that's the takeaway question. And for further digging,
You could definitely track those legal challenges against the EOs in education.
or follow the Section 232 investigations, especially the one covering the electronics supply chain.
Right. It's all moving fast, so keeping an eye on those details will give you an even sharper sense of where things might be headed.